The people at Tinder are genuinely trying to create an environment where they can get people to connect with each other. It's not a hookup app, right? They care very deeply about their customers. What we started to realize was like, we're a product-led company. We're always coming up with new ideas. We're always trying to stay fresh, but we also can't neglect the experience that users are having today. And that's what they're doing. Users are leaving the experience that they're having today, not the one that you're promising them for tomorrow.
Welcome to LaunchPod, the show from LogRocket, where we sit down with top product and digital leaders. Today, we're talking with Curtis Stevens, who until recently was Tinder's Director of Product Consumer Insights, and prior to that, held product leadership roles at Qualtrics, Amazon, and more. In this episode, Curtis shares how AI can actually be a tool for human connection, his process behind Tinder's transformation into customer-centricity with real, measurable results, how to balance short-term user joy with long-term product innovation and future features, and how AI is driving customer experience changes faster than research can follow and what you can do to keep up. So here's our episode with Curtis Stevens. All right, Curtis, good to have you on the show, man. Welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. Great to be here.
I'm excited. We met back in Seattle about 6 months ago. It's been great, staying in touch. But now, I want to talk about most recently, you were over at Tinder. You came in with really a mandate to help build a culture of customer centricity. We're going to go into what that looked like, what that meant, and how you did that. But maybe before we dive in, can you just give us like the 60-second background of how did you end up there and what took, Curtis Stevens from beginning a career to where you are now?
Probably most relevant would be going back to my days at Amazon. The first half of my time there was spent in Amazon advertising when it was still very much a startup mode and running program management, teams of global program management, and then lastly, like a Lean Six Sigma team.
Mhm.
And we had to build it from scratch, and I didn't know that much about it other than common sense things you learn in college, right? So I started reaching out to different teams, and it turned out the customer experience team and the experience strategy teams had Lean Six Sigma. And so I started working with them and we started developing Kaizens. And then I started to realize there's like something to this about learning more about our customers. It's not just process improvement, right? So I wound up meeting one of the directors out there and they brought me in to start working in the experience strategy team. So I became a senior customer experience manager. And my time there was incredible. I learned, talk about customer centricity, right? I learned everything. I went to call centers, I talked to customers and started developing this approach to journey mapping, which was a derivative of Kaizens, but with more customer empathy and more of a voice of customer aspect to it. I watched third-party prime and third-party sales grow from 6 customer service agents to like 135,000 globally and help build the strategy for that. And it was really incredible. But I started wondering if I was a one-trick pony, and Qualtrics came knocking on my door and they were like, hey, maybe you'd like to come over here and start doing this for clients. So I went to Qualtrics and started heading up the technology consulting teams there, first as program architect and then as a leader, and started using journey workshops also internally for us for even things like how to optimize the source to hire experience and things like that to make it more equitable. And then a friend of mine and colleague that I work at Amazon wound up going to Tinder and we used to meet every other week. And finally I said to him, like, I'd like to go start my own CX program because I'd done the internal one at Qualtrics. And so he brought me in and it was a greenfield opportunity. Tinder felt like they were customer centric and there was an appetite to learn.
And so that took us to your most recent role where you came into Tinder. I think everyone knows Tinder, right? The dating app, swipe left, swipe right. This is all stuff I had to learn actually, because I was married before Tinder was popular, but so I never used these things. And now I was re-educated though before we talked. So yeah, I guess you come in, you have this push to help build a more customer-centric culture. And I think it all started from a point where you gave a fateful presentation. I don't know the whole story here.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of an interesting backstory. I came into Tinder and I started listening and learning about the culture and about the mindset of the people at Tinder. I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize is like the people at Tinder are genuinely trying to create an environment where they can get people to connect with each other. It's not, a hookup app, right? Like people actually want people to have relationships and they care very deeply about their customers, right? But what I noticed was there was a lot of disparate data and people were a little reticent to invest in a new approach. So I had to think about like, how do I win these people over? How do I get Tinder to see the value of CX? And so I dug in on journey mapping and journey workshops because I know that's a way to break down information silos and organizational silos and also get buy-in from everybody in advance. Because we all know, like, part of the problem, you're a product person and you've got an idea, you need to talk the engineering team into it. You need to talk the executives into it. And journey workshops are a great way to kind of get all of that lined up and build those relationships between teams.
So if I understand right, because we all witnessed the explosion of the modern mobile centric dating app. And I think Tinder was the leader of the pack there, right? Kind of came out, and that was the first. If you say dating apps, Tinder is probably one of the top ones that people will say. But with massive growth over time, you start to hit a point where you are so penetrated into the market that, it becomes just your denominator of members is so high that a little bit of churn can actually really erode a lot of new growth on top. So is that kind of what was going on there? Was not that there was shrinkage or anything, but more, is it early to kind of, it's easy to ignore CX early on because you can just, a healthy, strong top of funnel covers a lot of sins. But at some point, retention becomes just so much more important. And we've had like Zuora on recently and several other companies that are all talking about now part of their growth strategy involves much heavier push on retention because, LTV values go up. It just helps your top line, growth numbers because you're not losing as much on the bottom and all these things. But it's really growth through retention becomes important, and a great customer experience is huge there.
It really is. And the sort of generational movement in terms of like your core customer base, the segments of users and everything, they're always aging. They're either aging up or aging out, right? And so you have to really keep abreast of some of the changes that are happening in society and how people's communication styles and values change over time. And that was kind of what led to this fateful discussion. I gave a presentation to the C-suite executives about the user experience. I was trying to come up with a unique insight, something that would be new and impactful for, say, future planning. And one of those things was like, we did a bunch of research on the numbers. We were looking at people who weren't reactivating, and customer churn in specific, and trying to ask ourselves why. And what we started to realize was like, we're a product-led company. We're always coming up with new ideas. We're always trying to stay fresh, but we also can't neglect the experience that users are having today. And that's what they're doing. Users are leaving the experience anywhere. They're leaving the experience they're having today, not the one that you're promising them for tomorrow. And so we gave this presentation, we talked about some light numbers. And then at the end, we showed them, it was kind of like session replay, but not quite as sophisticated. I wish we'd had that at the time, but it would have been really useful, But what we did was we showed this first person view, a screen recording, and it was, somebody was swiping and it was an upsell, or did you know how to use this feature, or do you know that? It was several swipes in before they actually got to a profile. And the executives just kind of looked at that and they were like, wow, we need to fix that. And the chief product officer, Sarah Rose, she came up to me and she was like, I want to be your executive sponsor. And that just kind of, when things kind of exploded, right? Like a couple of weeks later, we got to talking and she's like, I want to bring you under me and I want you to be the interim director. We'll see how it goes over time over these three teams, because the three research teams, which was experience strategy, consumer research, and user experience research, they were all located in different divisions, Right. And so there was a lot of overlap. There were opportunities to collaborate that weren't being taken advantage of. It's simple human nature, right? You're busy. And so she gave me the mandate to come in and consolidate these teams into one sort of organism, if you will.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that makes sense. I can see where at one point you wouldn't set up that way, but it intuitively makes sense that those things all overlap heavily. I got to ask, who were you reporting into when you first joined the company? Where did the position sit then?
When I was first reporting into the company, I was sitting underneath trust and safety operations, which is actually great because I got to build really strong relationships with the operators and the agents on the front lines, as well as the trust and safety product and engineering teams. It was very valuable.
Right. But if you're looking at how do we drive the company to being more customer focused and CX led, it feels like, like you said, Tinder is a product led company. There's not a sales team out pushing, you don't have SDRs calling people. You don't have, that'd be hilarious actually if you had SDRs calling people, but it's people discover the app and you have to onboard yourself. It's very person centric like that. And if you want to make this transformation, there's really no other spot you could have been but under the product banner, because that's where it's going to all live. And you're right, you're going to need the connections into trust and safety. You're going to need all those departments you talked about around customer research. But I think this is a good point to go into, we're going to go into what actually happened over the time and how you drove this forward. But so many projects like this, I've found just time and time again, if you don't have the right structure or the right setup, you're just hobbling yourself from the beginning. Like you said, people think, oh, you can collaborate, you can go talk to them still, they're right there. But like you said, people get busy, and the first thing to go is sometimes cross-team collaboration. But if they're all together, and if you kind of have all three, that's setting you up for success right from the beginning.
Oh, 100%. When the reorg happened, there were so many product managers and product designers that they were sending messages. They were just like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. I don't know why we haven't done this before. It was a win, and it was a question of how do we get the right research to the right people at the right time? And how do we snap what we're doing to the product lifecycle so that we can do that effectively?
It also at some level sends, just a cultural message to the company. This is important, and we are aligning teams around this goal. Cool. So now you're set up for success, right? Like before you had excuses. If it didn't work, you could have, oh, the teams weren't together. Oh, I didn't have the right executive sponsor. But now you got the CPO, rallying for you and pushing you. You got all the teams you need aligned. What do you do now? What happened after that for Curtis?
Yeah, it was, it was incredible. So what I wound up doing is taking some time, and I went and I spoke with all the executives, and tried to understand what it was they were trying to gain, what some of the concerns were, what were some of their problems, sitting in on their meetings and just learning a lot. And then we came up with a strategy, which was how do we align these three teams to help the product team as quickly as possible, right? And yeah, it might be a little sticky, but it was to position research as a proactive strategic force that empowers human insight to business outcomes, helping Tinder make bold user-centered decisions that drive growth, innovation, relevance in a rapidly evolving dating landscape, which is pretty much, what we did. And if you think about it, you have three teams: experience strategy, which is focusing on building a holistic understanding of the end-to-end customer journey and being able to speak to that. Customer corner, every opportunity we have, we're right out there front and center talking about the customer and the journey, and then doing that over all touch points, right? And so that gives us those listening posts and help us understand the moments that matter and bring people together for collaborative discussions. We have consumer research, which has got a little more longevity to it, right? So understanding the user perceptions, attitudes, and needs as they evolve over time. What are their motivations? What are they trying to really get out of the experience? And then figuring out how to broaden our business strategies, marketing strategies, and product development decisions to be more tailored around what's coming, like Gen Z, Gen Alpha eventually, right? And then user experience research, which is focusing specifically on the experience that users are having when they're interacting with Tinder, not just the products, but the services. And then ensuring that Tinder was easy to use, intuitive, and met the user needs. And to do that, we have to dive in, right? And build those relationships with the product teams.
And, you joined the company August of 2022. So we're not that far removed at that point from people being terrified of being with other humans, pretty much. Did that play into it all of kind of the opening back up of society? Was it a good jumping off point at that point to kind of rethink this stuff, or?
Oh, that's endlessly fascinating. I mean, honestly, when I first came into Tinder, I thought this isn't that complicated. It's going to be, I'm going to get bored, right? And endlessly fascinating, right? Because, you can do a good job of connecting people and matching or whatever, right? But what happens after that? And you got a bunch of people who were huddled up in their houses and walking alone and not really communicating, especially in their formative years, right? As transitioning into adulthood, nobody knows how to talk to each other. And so the sort of interpersonal dynamic was something that, we started to really lean in on. It's just how do we get people connecting and talking with each other?
I'll be honest, that sounds like a great use for AI, right? Everyone talks about now you have people just kind of write, everything's being written by, AI, and, ChatGPT fuels answers. I saw a commercial or an ad the other day, whereas two people in a gas station, a customer and a cashier. And it was the cashier said, "Hello to me. What do I say?" And then, it went back and forth. But in reality, that might actually help. At least some people I've known who did Tinder. It's well, I think I know why you're not getting past that first little bit of conversation. You sound insane. Maybe tighten it up. And that'd be a good use case there. Do you really want to say that? Is that really your answer right now?
And that's kind of exactly where things are kind of headed.
Yeah.
I mean, I have some personal thoughts on this that have nothing to do with the Tinder strategic roadmap, right?
Yeah.
But imagine a realm where, you've got, what do you call it? A sidekick or a wing person, right?
Yeah, you got the branding for it right there. You call it, wing person.
Yeah. Or a matchmaker who's "Hey, Jeff, I noticed that, you and Mary have a ton in common, they recently posted that they're going to a concert and they're super excited about it. Have you been to one, And then it starts getting that, just kicking off that conversation to get people
Yeah.
more warm and comfortable and running introductions and, maybe in real time, even just like helping you out with messaging, like, really, like maybe forego the fish pic.
It's great. I mean, I think it shows the cultural permutation that Tinder and apps like that had because, like I said, I was, if not married, I was already like well into a relationship with the person who became my spouse by the time Tinder even, came out. But all these things, it's not just a dating app, it's pop culture references, right? Like the fish pic, swipe right. All these things are things that transcend dating apps. And so that, kind of goes back to, right, the importance of the customer experience around that because there are certain things that people expect, but there's also certain things people see as negatives. And how do you build and enhance that experience without losing some of those things that are culturally important, deeper at some level than even just user experience, but like culturally important across, millions of people.
Yeah, I agree. And how do you use that as a means for connecting people in a way that
Yeah.
they're feel comfortable and safe and empowered? That one's going to go on for a very long time, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, this seems like a place where there's a lot of opportunity around, morphing it forward, but maintaining that. But I think it's a lost opportunity. If there's no AI agent named wingman or wing person or wing woman pretty shortly, I just feel like that's a lost opportunity. Okay. So, right, we're at this point where you have the structures up, right, and you have the ability to do the research, I guess. Can we go into a little bit? What did you uncover? Like, can we talk about some examples that actually caused, changes in how Tinder approached things?
There are a few things. One, I guess, is just speaking very pragmatically, right? Is going through and consolidating the three teams onto a common roadmap with a common intake process
Right.
and really sussing out what kind of problems we're trying to solve. And I think problem identification is one of the biggest struggles, especially with a young workforce learning how to think very critically about things, is really trying to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. If you want to do, for instance, the women's experience is extremely important at Tinder, right? And so one of our first journey workshops was around new user experience for women, day 0 through 7, which is very critical, right? The first week you're on the app, it's really important to have that good experience. And that was when we started introducing sort of like, we can gather up all these improvement opportunities and we can ideate, well, how do we go about like stack ranking them? And how do we go about determining what the most important things are to action on? And that was the first one was when we learned it's really important to have executive buy-in on the ideas that are coming out of it. And what's kind of funny is like each time we did one of these workshops, we learned something else. And oddly, it just led to the next one. Like it was just a series of workshops, right? Like the new user experience for women days 0 through 7, we noticed that bots and bad actors were much more prevalent than we would have liked, right? And so going in and identifying some AI companies that can help us better identify and tag these bots and bad actors way ahead of time so that the agents aren't being overwhelmed, so that we're protecting the women's experience, because if the women don't feel safe, they're not going to stay on your app.
That's really interesting. So kind of starting with even the, some of the actions around building a great customer experience to even have to do with, new features or anything. But it's also these other things that you don't see as you can't just go through the onboarding flow and use like a UX analytics tool because it won't capture these things. And this kind of gets to the point that you brought these teams need to be together, right? Because some of this derives from what are people concerned about and you need to talk to people. Some of this derives from analyzing where people are running into friction in the app itself, and bringing this all together gives you the holistic ability to kind of prioritize. Without that though, you're probably going to go after problems you're trying to fix that they're important, but maybe in reality, like the number 8 problem, and you're treating it like the number 1 or 2.
100%. Also minor things, right? Okay, it's a company, we're trying to make money, when is the most appropriate time to upsell somebody? Honestly, I think Hinge has one of the best approaches to feedback gathering I've seen in a long time. Their CX team out there is brilliant. Emily, who runs it. But one of the things that they do that's really unique is they've got this notion of roses, right? That's their soft version. Who doesn't like a rose, right?
Right.
And roses are incredibly useful. What happens is users use one, they get the attention of the person they're trying to get, starts a conversation, but you only get one a month or something like that if you're, a free user or on the lower tier. And so what happens is Hinge is like, that worked, you're starting to get hits, and that's when they're asking you like, hey, would you like to get a couple more roses? You're like, yeah, because they proved the value to you by helping you accomplish what you want, which is a connection.
It's a swipe right for dopamine, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and it completely lines up with the journey. Like, yeah, that was pretty successful. I wouldn't mind mentioning a couple more of these. And then the post-date feedback mechanism. It's like, hey, how was that date? Did you guys meet in real person? Are you going to see them again? Like
mhm.
you want to take them off your list. And what that does is the company now understands the success rate of, what you're trying to accomplish, which is meeting somebody, of value and someone you can connect with. And they also understand when it doesn't work out that way so that they can start to think about how to get you matched up with the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
Really smart. And that stuff comes from journey workshops
Mhm.
and talking with your customers and trying to understand. And so that was kind of what the path we were going down with Tinder at the time was like, okay, well, when is the right time? Like, how often should we be bombarding somebody? You wouldn't know that without a first person view.
It's interesting because one of the benefits I've had from doing this podcast and, being able to travel the country and host, product leaders all over in the, like where we met at dinner in Seattle has been hearing kind of these problems. And one thing I've noticed is cross industry, you run into exactly the thing you just talked about. There is data from tools you're using to monitor in-app. I will plug, things like LogRocket, which do, session replay and how do you intelligently surface that. Now we use AI to watch the sessions for you and surface it all up. But it's more than that, right? It is, you are having customer conversations to understand that, like the piece you said about how do people feel safe and where is that important? You have kind of journey maps. You have, I mean, in Tinder's case, in most dating apps, I would wager, like, even if you look at, the Apple App Store review center, there's gonna be a lot of great feedback in something like that where people are saying what angered them and why they didn't use the app anymore or something like that. And going through all that is a huge lift. And so, we're B2B analytics software. Tinder is probably the farthest thing I can think of from B2B analytics software, in that it's sexy and it's cool and it's hip, and analytics is, not those things. But it's the same problem set.
Yeah, it is. It is the same problem set. And I think that's a really important thing to think about, right? Is like, you know, tools like LogRocket, it's not just a B2B tool, right? Like
Right.
it really is designed to help us better understand our users, better understand the business impact certain decisions are having, and then getting that fresh first person view so that you can have a conversation, right? It's like stories, it's storytelling.
Yeah.
I want to be able to tell a compelling story. I want to be able to say, if I'm in retail, right, I want to be able to say that when a person has this kind of negative experience, right, how does that impact their purchase behavior or their searching behavior, or their activity levels, right? Once you understand that, there's like a financial impact to that experience, and you can start telling a story and having a more holistic conversation around what to do with it.
Exactly. And so, maybe to switch topics slightly here, but to stay on the general macro topic, right? Like a big impact to this work really, I feel like, has come in the past, 2 years and really accelerated in the past, 6-9 months, where AI is taking what teams like yours could do before. And there was just so much like manual work and manual aggregation, and just really like bionicizing the whole thing. And this has been something you've talked about quite a bit, actually, is you can basically do the research faster than ever before, but almost faster than that you can keep up with. And it leads to some risk and some really interesting insights and some challenges and some benefits. Maybe let's pivot to, for leaders who are looking at a program like this, how can they be looking at AI? What is the stuff they need to think about from a cautionary sense? What's the thing they should lean into? Like, how do you look at this stuff?
I think it's a few things, right? One is like, from an ethical standpoint, is trust but verify. Like AI is bionic. I mean, it is absolutely incredible. I had situations where like my model was like, I was like, hey, I need some customer quotes around this user experience. And it gave me a bunch of really great ones. And then I went and searched for them. I was like, okay, not representative contacts, right? Like I need actual customer, quoting. And
You were the third person I've talked to in the past 24 hours who mentioned that specific thing. Like, give me sources, cite them, and then going, I don't think you just made that up, didn't you? It's like, yeah, I did, my bad.
Yeah, it's like, right. Like anybody who's used, ChatGPT to write a resume, right? Like,
Yeah.
like all of a sudden somehow it just works in a bunch of stuff that it thinks you should have done, and it's like,
Right.
so like, it's the same thing.
That's totally what I'm going to, if I ever do use Tinder, by the way, that's totally what I'm going to blame it on. I'm 6'5", and then, the AI just, I don't know, that's a hallucination. I don't know where that came from. I'm totally just blame the AI for anything like that. It put the fish picture there.
Yeah. It's a
So
conversation starter, right? But, to me, it's like trust but verify.
yeah,
It's also like, I think we were talking at one point about like, stitching the data together, voice of customer, voice
yeah.
of agent, voice of process, voice of business. And if you can start to tie those things together, you'll figure out the hallucinations a lot more quickly. But in terms of speed to insights, the closer you can get that data married to create a view and tell a story,
Mhm.
the faster you're going to be able to make these decisions, or at least feel a stronger degree of confidence that you're solving the right problem, right? I would say the other one is experimentation, right? Like a lot of companies that I've seen, they're leveraging AI, they're getting these insights, they're modeling the results, but their approach to experimentation is like, they get nervous, right? You launch something, you try it out, and it doesn't go the way you thought, or it's affecting the wrong KPIs. Is it just take a minute and don't question necessarily the experiment, but how effectively are you launching these experiments and how effectively are you learning and then iteratively improving whatever it is you want to focus on? I think that's really key is like, how are we using this data? How are we executing at the end?
And I think, right, that's a good point you bring up is kind of, it's still AI or not. It comes down to where, software is just the means to the end. Software is not the actual thing. The actual thing for Tinder, right, is like you said, it's human connection. For LogRocket, it's insights into how users are experiencing your digital product. AI doesn't change that. It just accelerates your ability to move forward. It allows you to process bigger context windows, but it is just like avoid the, what we talk a lot here about operational failure and experimental failure. And right, like experimental failure is just, you tried something, you had a good hypothesis, it just doesn't work. Like sometimes just things just don't work. It's just, you were wrong. And then operational failure is, you don't know if you're right or wrong. You just didn't do the thing right. And I feel like that's something I always keep in mind and that AI can very much help with is as you're parsing through like why something failed and you start to look at feedback, you look at how it was run to your point or how you ran the thing, it can really help you first get into validate some of those things and understanding why. And you can start to see like, can we trust this or do we just need to throw the whole thing out?
Why is the key point, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of times, if you're trying to move fast, people aren't taking the time to actually ask, why didn't this work? Exactly.
Right.
Wrong market, wrong treatment, even minor changes in the user experience can have dramatic results, and how quickly can you recover from it? Sometimes it's I mean, I see ideas boomerang all the time and, it's easy to kind of roll your eyes and be like, oh God, not this again. But the reality is like, yeah, the boomerang actually makes a certain degree of sense. If you're like, hey, we're onto something. We need to experiment with this more. How do we get this rapid prototyping and experimentation that's not disruptive to the overall experience?
No, it's interesting because like, I mean, to the point you made about Hinge, right? Like a small tweak there, people, if you took away people like roses and you try just to upsell them on, oh, hey, you gave a rose away and now you're out of roses. Do you want to move to paid to get more? If you didn't get an answer, if you had a, no positive reaction to the one you did, you're probably not going to. But if you focus more on, like you said, the people who had a positive reaction from that and it drove some kind of interaction, you're likely going to see a lot more. But that's a pretty small tweak in execution. But it's about the why. The why is that important is what really is the lever. So I guess looking at that, did you find ways to kind of reduce those hallucinations or kind of, as you're kind of going through and getting the pieces that you want tight proof points because sometimes you just want directional accuracy, right? Like what are the big themes? It's not going to make up usually giant themes out of nothing, but like quotes and stuff like that, it will. So, I guess you found ways to kind of get, drive accuracy where you need it and drive speed and breadth.
I wish they were more sophisticated. Like earlier on in my career, I was an auditor, an IT auditor at Deloitte, right? And I learned everything that you could think about for like sampling and frameworks. And so for me, I do a lot of like quick gut checks with the numbers, right? Like I'm a numbers person. I can start, I don't like graphs. I could start an entire wall of any kind of measures and find patterns that might take someone else a little bit longer. When I see a pattern, a disruption in the sound or the rhythm, I'm immediately drawn to it, right? And it's the same thing when you're running experimentation is like, what were the results? Did we run it long enough? What were the results and how closely do the results resemble what you were expecting to see? And then asking why. Why am I seeing something different?
Why is usually a pretty good question in almost all cases. Why did this work? Why does it not work? Why is this different than I expect? And I found is again talking to just several leaders across several different verticals and different companies in the same vertical. That seems to be something that people come back to a lot. Is it can help you move faster, but you got to understand the details behind it, and you got to kind of make sure you're using the right tools in the right place. But the pace we can move at with CX research now is just so much faster than ever before. Use it for good. Use it to create, things like better ways to give out roses or other kind of great human interactions. Not, don't misuse it and just, get nothing valuable.
in big and small ways, right? Like, I think that's really key. To me, AI is an incredible tool for bringing people together. It's an
Yeah.
incredible tool for synthesizing what you need in a way that is digestible and easy to interpret and easy to have a conversation about. I'm going to get a
Mhm.
t-shirt that says "Why Guy," I think.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, Curtis, this was great, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Great to hear, at Tinder, how do you go from coming in and saying there's a mandate to grow CX into really driving a CX culture and creating a better, more enjoyable app to use that people can move forward with, that they feel comfortable with, that they get what they want out of, so that you keep your users longer, they refer more, you get more people to use it, and just grow faster. Yeah, and then AI and how it affects it is going to be really interesting going forward. If people want to pick your brain more on any of these topics or want to reach out or, have thoughts, is LinkedIn the best place to reach, or is there a better way?
Yeah, either LinkedIn or email works, at
Mhm.
least for starters. Yeah, always down to have a conversation around this. I'm very excited about research and the human experience. Yeah, you can reach me at stevens.curtis@gmail.com. That's my personal email, or LinkedIn is fine as well.
Yeah.
And Jeff, it's a
Also,
pleasure. Thank you.
yeah, thank you for coming on. This is a blast. And I hope to see you next time we're in Seattle.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good
All right.
one. Great to
Thank
be
you. You
here.
too.